My name is Emily Tran, and for the past 3 years, I dedicated my life to my job at Bravura Strategies, a mid-sized marketing agency in downtown Seattle. Not just worked there. I lived that job. I was the first one in, last one out. I skipped birthdays, date nights, even my own graduation dinner to hit client deadlines. I didn't just manage accounts, I nursed them back to health when other account managers let them rot. There was one client I was especially proud of. Radiant Bloom, a high-end skincare brand run by an exacting CEO who once fired a vendor for using the wrong font in a pitch deck. When Radiant Bloom first came to us, they were 1 foot out the door before we even signed the contract. But somehow I got them to stay. I learned their product line inside out. I stayed up all night prepping reports, got on weekly calls with their exec team, even ran interference when a creative director messed up their ad campaign. Within 6 months, they became our top billing account, all because of me. So you can imagine my shock when I noticed my scheduled hours started shrinking. It started quietly. I went from 40 hours a week to 36, then 32. No big announcement, no sit-down conversation. Just passive calendar changes and fewer tasks in my queue. When I finally asked my boss, Jason, what was going on, he leaned against the doorframe of my cubicle like we were old college pals and said, "We're just spreading resources a bit thinner for now. Nothing personal. Think of it like a little breather." A breather? From what? Being the only one keeping half these accounts from bailing. But fine. I kept my head down. I worked harder in those limited hours than most people did in a full week. I figured maybe this was temporary. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Until Jake was hired. Fresh out of undergrad, still smelled like campus coffee and unpaid internships. Jason introduced him as a rising star. And suddenly this kid had a desk right across from mine, full-time hours, and an attitude like he already owned the place. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Everyone has to start somewhere. Then Jason started assigning Jake my clients. One by one. And not the annoying ones, the ones I had built strong relationships with. The ones I'd saved from churning. But the real slap in the face came on a Tuesday morning, just after I'd returned from a pitch meeting for Radiant Bloom. Jason called me into his office with that smug little smirk he wore when he thought he was being charming. "We're going to shift the Radiant Bloom account to Jake," he said casually, like he was asking if I wanted coffee. "Just for now. To help him grow. You'll still be involved, peripherally." My throat went dry. Radiant Bloom is my account. Jason shrugged. "You're still part of the team, Emily. Just not in the same capacity." And just like that, I realized this wasn't about budget. It wasn't temporary. Jason had decided I wasn't worth full pay. Not because I underperformed, but because I'd done my job too well. I made things look easy, and now he thought he could hand it off to someone younger, cheaper, and less likely to question his every move. I sat there, nodding slowly, pretending like I was taking it gracefully. But inside, a fire was lighting itself in the deepest part of me. One thought kept echoing in my mind like a drumbeat. You don't get to erase me from my own work. He thought cutting my hours would make me fade quietly. That I'd go home, sulk, maybe quit out of frustration. But he was wrong. I wasn't going anywhere. Not until I made sure he'd regret ever taking me for granted. I walked out of Jason's office like I had just been told the weather. Not that I'd been stripped of the very account I'd spent years nurturing. My coworkers glanced up, sensing the shift. I smiled tightly, said nothing, and returned to my desk. But inside I was screaming. There's something dangerous about a woman who's been underestimated one time too many. I wasn't angry, not just angry. I was clear. Clear in a way I hadn't been in years. Jason thought I'd just accept this and shrink. But I'd already started plotting before I even sat back down. First step. Damage control. I called Lauren Chan, the chief marketing officer at Radiant Bloom. My point of contact for the last 2 years. She picked up on the second ring. "Emily," she said brightly. "Perfect timing. I wanted to go over that Q2 rollout." "There's been a change," I said carefully. "My manager decided to reassign your account to a newer team member. I just wanted to make sure you heard it from me." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, what?" Lauren asked, the friendliness draining from her voice. I kept my tone professional but firm. "They'll be transitioning your project to Jake, a newer hire. I'll still be around, but not in a lead role." Another pause. Then, Absolutely not. I could hear the tension in her voice, not just irritation but betrayal. We sign with you, Emily. You're the reason we stayed after the first 3 months. I'm going to make some calls. Lauren, I started. But she'd already hung up. I knew then that I had leverage. Real leverage. Jason hadn't bothered to consult Radiant Bloom. He'd made a power move without calculating the fallout. Classic Jason, all ego, no foresight. But I wasn't done yet. While Radiant Bloom was fuming, I reached out to someone else, Travis Langdon, a senior executive at Vexero Creative, one of Bravura's biggest competitors. We'd met once at a marketing conference and exchanged contacts. I remembered 2 things about him. He was sharp and he was hungry. I sent a simple message. Hey Travis, hope you're well. I might be open to new opportunities and I might have a client who would be interested in coming with me. Want to grab coffee? He replied in 10 minutes. We met at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from Bravura. I wore a blue blazer, no logo, no name badge. Nothing to trace the meeting back to my current employer. Travis sat down, eyes bright. So what are we talking about here? I smiled. Let's say you had a chance to bring in a multi-million-dollar skincare brand that's unhappy with their current agency, and the person who knows all their KPIs, pain points, and preferred ad style was sitting right in front of you. He blinked, then leaned forward. Emily, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, I replied calmly, that Bravura took me off an account I built. Radiant Bloom is furious. I know their entire digital strategy for the next 12 months and frankly, I'm not interested in staying where I'm not respected. Travis nodded slowly. And you'd come to us? If the offer is right. I want a lead strategist position, not entry-level nonsense. And I want room to build a team my way. He grinned. I think we can make something work. We shook hands. I walked out of that cafe knowing my next steps weren't just revenge, they were justice. Because this wasn't about getting even. It was about correcting the story. I didn't want Jason to just regret cutting my hours. I wanted him to look at his empty client list and know exactly who took them. By the end of the week, Travis had sent me a formal offer. It was everything I asked for: senior strategist title, full autonomy over my client portfolio, and a signing bonus that practically made up for all the unpaid overtime I'd clocked at Bravura. But I wasn't done with Jason just yet. See, I could have handed in my resignation quietly. I could have packed up my desk with a forced smile and let the narrative be that Emily moved on. But no, Jason had tried to erase me from my own success. He made his move. Now it was my turn. So I stayed 1 more week. Why? Because I wanted to prepare the handoff. Not for Jake. No, he could rot in chaos. I wanted to make sure Radiant Bloom had everything they needed before making the jump. Lauren and I had already spoken, multiple times in fact. She was furious. Apparently, Jake had fumbled the first follow-up call so badly that Radiant Bloom had already started exploring new agencies. I merely provided the direction. You didn't hear it from me, I told her. But Vexero has a growing luxury portfolio and strong CRM tools. Worth a conversation. She didn't even hesitate. Already scheduled. They'll be hearing from our CEO too. Jason had no idea this was happening, not yet. As far as he knew, I was just being professional during my final days. He even had the nerve to stop by my desk one morning and say, "Glad to see you've taken the transition so gracefully, Emily. You're setting a great example." I smiled at him. Not because I respected him, but because I was imagining the moment when his phone would ring and everything he built on my back would start crumbling. My resignation email was scheduled to send at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday. But I didn't just send a resignation, I sent a memo. A calm, detailed breakdown addressed to Jason and the board, outlining the mishandling of accounts, the arbitrary reduction in staff hours, and how that directly impacted client retention, particularly with Radiant Bloom. I attached performance reports, client satisfaction scores, and email threads. I made sure every line was measured but impossible to ignore. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't name call. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder. At 9:01 a.m. I shut my laptop, took a final sip of lukewarm office coffee, and walked out of Bravura Strategies for the last time. By noon my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria, one of the few honest account managers still working there. Jason is losing it. Radiant Bloom terminated the contract. Said they were following their strategist. He's been in his office pacing for an hour. Jake looks like he's going to cry. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat down at my new desk at Vexero, looked around at my new team and exhaled. There was no chaos here.
No undermining.
Just opportunity and the freedom to be valued for what I actually brought to the table. And as for Jason, well, I hadn't even begun to take the rest of his client list. 3 weeks into my new role at Vexero Creative, I had already done more in that short time than I've been allowed to do in my final year at Bravura. And the best part? I wasn't just given freedom, I was trusted. Travis and I worked like a two-person storm. The moment Radiant Bloom signed on, under my full management, we launched a full rebranding campaign. Their previous frustrations with Bravura became our playbook. I hired 2 junior strategists of my own, brought in a designer I used to work with, and watched our pitch deck make Lauren's eyes light up on the first call. We delivered results in 10 days. But while I was building, Bravura was bleeding. Word got around fast in the client world. These people talked, especially when they noticed the calm confidence in Radiant Bloom's new rollout and started asking, "Did Emily Tran do that?" That's when the emails started. First from a boutique fitness brand I'd worked with 2 years ago. Then a fintech startup I helped onboard during the pandemic. One by one, old clients found their way to my inbox, curious, frustrated, asking where I'd gone and how they could work with me again. I wasn't actively poaching. I didn't need to. Bravura had created the perfect storm by pretending I didn't matter. Now clients were making that very clear wasn't the case. One particular message stood out. It came from Daniel Cho, the founder of a high-growth e-commerce startup that Bravura had proudly used in every case study. I'd spent months fixing their abandoned cart system and boosting conversions through personalized ad strategies. Jason had once toasted to that project like he'd coded it himself. Daniel's message was short. "Hey Emily, saw the Radiant Bloom relaunch. Brilliant. Noticed your name on it. Are you open to us moving over?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, "Let's set up a call." 2 days later, Daniel officially terminated his contract with Bravura, citing strategic misalignment and lack of continuity. Another blow. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Jason, meanwhile, was spiraling. I wasn't getting updates directly, but Maria still sent the occasional whisper. According to her, the mood at Bravura had turned toxic. Account managers were being blamed for letting clients slip. Jake was now in charge of 5 accounts, all of which were either underperforming or actively complaining. HR had quietly started reassigning internal resources, and Jason? He was taking meetings in closed rooms with the blinds drawn. It wasn't just client loss anymore. It was reputation collapse. Bravura's leadership had sold themselves on the idea that I was replaceable, interchangeable, that cutting my hours was cost-efficient, that they could toss years of relationship building to the side and plug in someone cheaper, newer, more obedient. But relationships aren't copy-paste. Trust isn't a line item on a spreadsheet. And now they were learning that, publicly. At Vexero, we were just getting started. My team was expanding. The firm gave me a corner office with my name on the glass. My strategy sessions were turning into internal training models. And for the first time in my professional life, I wasn't being asked to do more with less. I was being asked, "What do you need to go even bigger?" Funny. 3 months ago, Jason thought cutting my hours would make me disappear. Instead, I became the biggest threat he'd ever underestimated. It was a quiet Thursday morning at Vexero when it happened. My phone buzzed. Not a text. Not an email. A direct call, from a number I hadn't seen in over a month. "Jason." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, just letting it ring. I could practically picture him on the other end, pacing his office, probably loosening that ridiculous skinny tie he always wore too tight. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line. A conversation? The body of the message was only one sentence. "I think we got off on the wrong foot, and I'd really like to discuss what it might look like to work together again." I leaned back in my chair, rereading it slowly. There it was. The quiet desperation disguised as diplomacy. After all the slights, the arrogance, the blatant dismissal of my value. Now that Bravura was hemorrhaging clients and its biggest accounts had fled? Now Jason wanted to talk. I clicked archive. That could have been the end of it. A silent, poetic closure. But I wasn't built for silence, not anymore. Not after learning that power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from knowing your worth and having the receipts to back it up. So I wrote him back. Subject. A conversation? Ying. Thanks for reaching out. I have to admit, your message made me smile. You once told me that every team member is replaceable. I suppose now you've had the chance to test that theory. I've moved on. Not just physically but mentally, professionally, and financially. I'm finally in a place that values strategic thinking over showmanship, trust over control, and people over ego. I hope you find your footing again, but I won't be part of rebuilding what I was never credited for in the first place. Best of luck. Emily Tran. I never got a reply. I didn't need one. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effects kept coming. 2 more clients I used to manage quietly left Bravura. Maria messaged me to say HR was cutting entire departments. Jake was reportedly on probation, and leadership was considering a rebrand to refresh company perception. But I didn't track every move. That was no longer my story to follow. My story now was bigger than revenge. At Vexero, my team had grown to 6 people. Radiant Bloom had just closed their best quarter in 2 years. Daniel's startup landed a Forbes feature crediting our campaigns. I was being asked to speak at conferences, mentor junior strategists, and pitch to brands I used to dream of reaching. One night, as I sat in my apartment overlooking the city skyline, I opened a fresh notebook and jotted down something I hadn't let myself believe for a long time. I'm not here to survive anymore. I'm here to lead. Jason cut my hours hoping I'd shrink into silence. Instead, I built a platform so wide he had to watch from below. And honestly, that was the best raise I've ever given myself.